Well, I'm back for another season of Miami Hurricanes football, and I'm going to do the 12-part series on our opponents. The first in the 2013 series is on the Florida Atlantic Owls. Our opponent on August 30th, the Friday night, home at Sun Life Stadium. Game time is 8 p.m. on ESPNU. Here's what you need to know about FAU. Last season, this was a Jekyll and Hyde team early in the year. They went 1-5, then they finished 2-4. Now you would think not too many changes, right? Well, looks can be deceiving. They did play hard in the second half of the season, beating Troy and Western Kentucky. The latter, of course, going to the Little Caesars Bowl before losing to Central Michigan in that game, and losing to South Alabama, which, by the way, just won two games all last year. They finished 2-11 and 1-7 in the Sun Belt Conference in overtime, and losing another pair by 10 points or less at Navy 24-17 and then FIU 34-24. Now you can see the progression of that team under Carl Pelini, who's entering year two in Boca Raton. It's not easy filling the shoes of a legend like Howard, and Pelini's going to have to really lean on the experience he obtained under three pretty good coaches: Bill Snyder, Frank Solich, and of course his brother Bo. Now some more background on Carl Pelini, to give you an idea who he is. In 1989, he was a graduate assistant and a restricted earnings assistant under Snyder at K-State, and he was part of a rebuilding project that turned out to be very, very successful in the Little Apple. His next stop was on the high school level in both Kansas and Ohio, where he was for a decade, spending the last 3 years at the latter. His first real look at the big time came in 2003 when Frank Solich hired his brother Bo to be Nebraska's defensive coordinator, and Bo brought him as a grad assistant. However, it would not be until 2005 where Carl Pelini would become a full-time college assistant for the first time. And that would be at Ohio, when Solich took over there after being fired in Nebraska. He hired him to coach the D-line. It would not be long before Carl would really be in the big time as an assistant. You see, in 2008, his brother Bo became the head coach of the Huskers. And naturally, he hired his brother Carl to be the defensive coordinator, where the Pelini brothers were both very successful. But it didn't take too long for some up-and-coming program to notice Carl had head coaching potential. And before the start of the last season, Carl Pelini was down to Boca Raton to be the new head coach at FAU, replacing Howard Schnellenberger, which you don't replace that easily, by the way. Now, having your brother at a BCS school like Nebraska and being very successful with that defense over there gave him this shot. And now he's trying to make his own name and make that FAU program very successful, continue the building of what Howard did over there, as they go into their first season in Conference USA, while at the same time he wants to continue growing that program in one of the most talent-rich states in the country, which happens to be Florida, and specifically South Florida. Now, enough about the coach. Let's get to the players on the field we need to watch. First, I'll start offensively. Now, of course, the biggest question mark here is the offensive line. They only returned two starters from 2012. The leader of that line is DeAndre Williams. He's easily the most battle-tested lineman on their roster. But after Williams, they do have another upperclassman, the senior Mustafa Johnson, who's going to play center. But after that, it's take your pick. Now, they need Johnny Ragu and Stern Vile to step up this season. Sorry about that. And be the beast on that line. Now, Ragu's an option on that blind side, but he's yet to do anything of consequences that make putting him at left tackle somewhat a questionable move. But the coaching staff there is very high on sophomore Mike Marcel, who they think could be a very good player for them and could end up as a starter as the season goes on. The O-line is one of their weak links, and that's not good, especially now in Conference USA. Now, the running game turned out to be a dud last year. Now, but you can attribute that to a couple things. One, the new offensive coordinator Brian Wright's spread system. Also, the lack of a running game due to the fact that the O-line was just awful, and they were out of position many times. Now, these group of backs are seniors, and they all returned this year. You have Jonathan Wallace, who had 648 yards last year. He's the leader of that group. You have Damian Fortner, who had 313 yards, and Martese Jackson, who had 224 yards. You also have Travis Jones in there, too. Now, Wallace separated himself a bit late in the year to have it go his way. Okay? They got away from the by-committee approach. Wallace became more of the man. But however that said, they're very high on Jackson. Because if he stays healthy and doesn't suffer from fumbleitis, because he happened to put the ball on the ground a lot last year, he's the kind of back that could break a game wide open with his speed and explosiveness. Their go-to guy in 2012 was Junior William Dukes in the passing game. He had 63 receptions for 979 yards, despite the lack of offense. And he was their main guy, and he does it very well too. And that's a very underrated and one to watch this year to see if he can get to that next level. Bottom line, he needs help because teams are going to double and triple him because the opposing defensive coordinators know FAU doesn't have a second or third option in the passing game. But one player that's going to have to step up and be that second option is senior tight end Nexon DeVorlius, who in 2012 was their team's third leading receiver and in the red zone the number one target. But outside of Dukes, they have seniors Daniel McKinney, who had 492 yards on 48 receptions last year, and DeAndre Richardson, who led their team in catches back in 2011, but was out all last year due to an injury. If Richardson stays healthy, he could be that second threat to make opposing defenses have to respect Richardson and not focus so much on Dukes. But they would really like to see junior Marcus Cunningham step up and produce this year. And they also have former Indiana transfer Jay McCanton in the mix as well. And that gives them another tall, lanky option to work with Dukes in the vertical game. But when you look at their receiving core, it's big. But except for Dukes, there's not much there that makes you go, wow. Now, let's turn over to the defense. Now, defensively, this is Carl Pelini's baby right here. You're going to see a team that, given a few years in the system, is going to be a defense to be very dangerous and a team to be reckoned with. But right now, it's a work in progress. Now, with them going into Conference USA this year, the one area that they'll be tested right away is against the run. Now, in the Sun Belt, that was more of a spread league, a lot with finesse over size and power. But in Conference USA, now no, it's not the big conferences like the SEC or the Big Ten, but FAU's going to find out very quick that they're going to see teams run the ball a lot in that league. And to that regard, guys like defensive lineman Trayvon Coley, who's 225 pounds and a sophomore with 39 tackles last year, and senior Brandon Bryant, 31 tackles, 4.5 for loss, are going to really be tested, especially on the middle of that line. And when you add sophomore Derek Butcher and Kayvon Sherrill to the rotation, it could be another long season Boca Raton if they can't stop the run. At the end, you have seniors Martin Wright, Corey Henry, and Andrew Streifler. They have to step up and show some leadership to the D-line, not have so much pressure put on the interior. But Wright is the leader up front on that line. But while you have Henry, who switched from defensive end from linebacker, who can give this pass rush a much-needed boost, and they really need it. Now, while they have trouble rushing the quarterback, the number one issue coming into this year is stopping the run consistently. Although, if they don't do that, it's going to be another long year in Boca Raton. Now, the linebacking core lost a big piece due to David Hines' graduation last year. However, experience-wise, they still have enough back to do some damage. They also bring back an experienced secondary, so their back seven's good. Now, at linebacker, they return quality starters in Andre Kirk, who has 70 tackles, Randall Johnson, 21 tackles, and Darius Glanton, 75 tackles, 5.5 for loss. But their best linebacker of that group is Kirk, not to mention the fact he has the most talent of the bunch here. However, you want to keep an eye out for Johnson, who because of an injury missed most of 2012. And in 2011, he was their second leading tackle with 92 tackles, 14.5 of those for loss. And their top reserve, sophomore Freedom Whitfield, had 12 tackles last year. You'll see extensive time in certain packages, but you want to keep an eye maybe for Johnson. Like you said, if he's healthy, it gives that linebacking core more depth and even more big plays. Their secondary will bring a lot of experience back, but they lose one major contributor, which would be at the strong safety spot. Brent Harstad is gone to graduation, and a strong candidate to win that position is senior Winfred Strickland, who had 24 tackles last year. They also returned senior Keith Reeser, 45 tackles, and junior Dejon Smith at the cornerback spot. But when you look at Reeser, he's an all-conference USA contender. And when you add senior Jeremy McKnight at the free safety spot, as well as promising sophomore Cravon LeBlanc at the nickel, you have a group that's intact. And in 2012, they played well from a statistical standpoint. Reed had 45 tackles, LeBlanc 42, Strickland 24. However, you got to factor in a couple things. Number one, opponents were able to run the ball effectively and not have to throw as much. Considering how pathetic FAU's defensive line was, you know, they didn't have to pass the ball as much. Now, another big issue is forcing turnovers. Last year, that was not almost non-existent, and in 2013, that has got to get better, especially now when they're going into Conference USA. If they don't force turnovers, it could be again another long season in Boca. Now, on special teams, I don't know how else to say it. Last year, they were just pathetic. Okay, this is something Carl Pelini's going to have to focus on more in 2013 in every phase of the game. Okay. They have Travis Jones back to return punts and kicks, and they also return Mitch Anderson at the kicker and sophomore Sean Kelly at punter. However, this is going to take a lot of time. They need really major work here. But it's a position I want you to watch when you look at FAU. At quarterback, this is really a two-person battle. It's between JUCO, Melvin German, and Quez Johnson. Suspect this will go right up just before game time on August 30th. The coaches think German has an edge, but like I said, this is one you're going to really want to watch as their camp starts. Now, in closing, let's look at FAU. Now, they're going to move into the Conference USA. They're going to have some issues there, and there will be some problems. But also at the same time, there's an opportunity to see where they are at and how far they need to come in the future. You know, for this year, Carl Pelini's not going to focus on wins and losses. He's going to focus on more, how do we get better? What do they have to improve? What do they think their strengths and weaknesses are? So, in 2013, my prediction for FAU is 4-8. In part 2 of the series, I'll talk about Armageddon, the opponent on 9-7. That, of course, would be the Florida Gators. Take care. Talk soon. Bye-bye.